Right? It's Trustee Fair, right?
Audit is,
I think so.
Yes.
she's
Yeah.
finance.
She's audit and finance.
Okay.
So Trustee Fair, we are ready to go when you are.
Good morning and welcome to the 195th meeting of the Audit Committee of Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. Can we get a roll call, please?
We'll note that all the trustees are present.
Okay, and can we get a motion for approval of the minutes from the 194th meeting?
So move. Second.
Thank you, the minutes are approved. There are no comments by the chair, so let's move to the external audit presentation by Clifton, Larson, Allen.
All right, so on teams here, we have Clifton, Larson, Allen, Hope Wheeler, Stacy Young, and Andrew Zabel. I think I saw all join, and they're going to go through the planning communications for the 2021 engagement package. Hope, are you going to kick it off?
Yes, I will. Thanks, Tim.
All yours.
All right. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for having us here this morning. Appreciate that. And my name's Hope Wheeler. I'm a principal with Clifton, Larson, Allen. And as Tim mentioned, Andrew Zabel is on the line too. He's the manager in charge of the audit of the financial statements. And Stacy Young is the manager in charge of your benefit plan audits. So we just wanted to take a few minutes this morning, as we do each year, just to communicate to you some required planning items and talk about the upcoming audit for your June 30, 2021 fiscal year. You can skip ahead on these slides to the fourth slide. Just going to start out briefly talking about the different Gatsbys that are coming up. The Government Accounting Standards Board issuances. Now, a lot of these were postponed kindly by Gatsby last year. So really, there's nothing in my mind that has a significant impact on your financial statements for this coming year. And I know Stacy confirmed nothing impacting the benefit plans. But that's just something I will, talk over with Marianne and Jean and the finance group there to make sure we're all on the same page there. But a big Gatsby coming up is Gatsby 87 of leases, and that got postponed to fiscal year 22. And Gatsby 89 definitely does have an impact on you. That's accounting for interest costs and a change in the way that is handled. They're no longer capitalized, but that was postponed to fiscal year 22. Now, I may end up hearing you guys are going to implement that early, but have not had that discussion yet. And then Gatsby 97 on component units is another upcoming Gatsby. There is a component of that related to 457 deferred compensation plans that we'll review with your team to see if that has an impact on the way you present your deferred compensation plan. But just note some other different Gatsbys there. Not aware of an impact on this at this point in time, so nothing that will make your statements look different compared to prior years at this point in time. Nothing significant to report there as far as the new Gatsbys as of this point in time. All right, if you skip ahead 2 slides, going to talk a little bit about the service team. And this is tentative. We're still working on ironing out the schedule for the August timeline, but these are some known players. Myself, like I mentioned, I'll be the principal on the audit and responsible for the overall audit work and delivery of all the financial statement items and reports. As I mentioned, Andrew Zabel's on the line. He's the manager. Lamont Williams, he was involved with the audit last year from the IT perspective, and he will work with your IT team to do the review of the IT control environment. Ethan Lay, we've been lucky to have him all 5 years on the MSD audit, and he is the senior in charge of the day-to-day field work of the financial statement audit. And he will lead the staff, and he'll be responsible for a lot of the major audit account audits. And he also assists with the review of your financial statements. A new player to the team this year will be Michaela Dawn. She'll be an associate responsible for testing certain controls and auditing specific balances. We do plan to have a couple other team members back in Matthew Dumskin. I didn't have a picture of him and I ran out of room, so I didn't get him on there. And then possibly Dylan again also, but we're still ironing out the details of the staff on the August field work. Jumping ahead to the benefit plan audits, a lot of the same team. Stacy, you can jump in if you want to talk about anyone else on the team, but Jock will be the partner in charge of the benefit plan audits, and Stacy will continue to manage the plan audits. Okay, let's skip to slide 9. Here, just talking a little bit about the audit plan overview. We start, as we are now, with our audit planning process, and that really kind of continues throughout the audit as we gain an understanding of your internal controls again, and if there have been any changes in your internal controls. We'll do that specific work. We call them our preliminary procedures. We don't have to do them once your year end has passed. So in May, we will plan on working on the audit, probably coming on site. We'll work out the details of that and just make sure everything, we're safe in doing that. But we will test internal controls at that point in time and do some testing of your billing cycles. And we also get started on your single audit or your federal expenditure testing. Then once your year end is over and finance has closed out the books and posted all adjustments for the year, we will come out as we usually do. We've already set these dates with Jean in August and do the year-end field work. We'll spend a couple of weeks doing that, testing the year-end account balances, updating any internal control work we need to, and finishing up the single audit, and doing everything we need to be comfortable with the account balances, that they are not materially misstated. Then within the next month of September, we'll get all the financial statement reports from your finance team, and then we will audit those and make sure they agree with the audited balances that we just completed in August. Then once again, we plan to have the final report, our final report, complete and ready to attach to your comprehensive annual financial report. I'm sure giving a clean opinion on your financial statements to be issued by mid-October. Then we'll present the results of the audit, and I believe it's in November audit committee meeting. The next slide is the same plan overview, but for the benefit plans. They don't do preliminary procedures in their work. It's a little smaller audits, but they will jump into the field work since these are December 31 year-end plans. They will do the field work for these in the month of April. And wrap up the financial statements and do the final reporting and issue them by the end of June and present to the audit committee in August. Next slide. Once again, just more details on the audit plan overview. I won't read through all of this on this slide in detail, but it just talks about what we as auditors, we look at audit risks in several different categories. We look for significant or fraud risks. We do that by interviewing several people, looking at what we think is significant risk for error. Revenue recognition is one that our firm has determined is always a significant risk. So we always look at revenue recognition or cutoff of accounts receivable and revenue. Debt is a significant area for you, so that's something we focus on also. We look at control risk. As I mentioned, we'll test controls to make sure they are functioning as they are supposed to be. We look at detection risk and inherent risk. And just part of inherent risk is we're looking at certain accounts that are estimates. Your unbilled revenues at the end of the year is an estimate, allowance for uncollectible receivables, and then your pension and other post-employment benefits is made up of significant estimates. So those are areas we'll focus on as far as significant estimates go. Next slide is the audit scope and deliverables. As mentioned, my team will be covering the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Attached to the CAFR is RSI, or Required Supplementary Information. We will review that for consistency to the CAFR. And then in addition to that, you can attach other supplementary information to the CAFR. For you guys, that is primarily
Yeah, I didn't see any questions from our side, so thank you very much.
thank you. Appreciate your time this morning.
Yep, have a good day.
Bye-bye.
All right, Trustee Fair, if it's okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is a presentation by Todd Loretta of Internal Audit on the purchase-to-pay cycle.
Yeah. Good morning,
Great.
everybody. So this was a review of the purchase pay cycle. Myself and the audit team from Bromsmith Walls worked on this. If you move to slide 1. The last time we reviewed this area was in 2017. It is an area that we review every 3 or 4 years. It's a very important area. Essentially, all district payments other than payroll and debt are processed and controlled through this cycle. The transaction volume is very large. Aggregate dollars are significant. You can see the dollar amounts there on the bottom of the page. Those are directly from our cash flow statement from FY19 and 20. Those dollars, those payments basically run through this business cycle. So it's a very important area. Move on to slide 2. Basically, all district divisions participate in this business cycle, but the overall area is administered and controlled by the finance department. Within finance, the main oversight and processing is performed by the accounting division, I should say. The purchasing division also does assist with a portion of the oversight duties. If we move on to slide 3, this slide shows the structure of the finance department, and it also is going to show you how internal audit, along with external auditors, who Hope was just speaking, is a good timing for this, how we audit these areas, how the coverage works. You can see finance is broken down into basically 3 divisions. Accounts receivable, that's the billing department. That's the division that does all the billing to our customers. You have accounting. They're basically the record keepers. They do the general accounting, they do the general ledger, they do the financial statements, accounts, obviously they're over accounts payable, and they're over the capital accounting as well. And to the right, you have purchasing. They handle the procurement function. Now, if you look at the blue circle, you'll see that's where external audit is. They're looking at everything in this area. As Hope's team will look at everything, but they're very focused on the financial statements, the general ledger. They're looking at the processes that are affecting the preparation of the general ledger and the financial statements. Now, we are in the red boxes there in the middle there. We are very process-oriented, but we're not nearly as concerned about the financials. We let Hope's team handle that. But we get into the weeds, so to speak, when it comes to the processes. We get really deep into the process level. Now, look to the left. You can see for accounts receivable, we're currently working on a revenue audit. We did one 3 or 4 years ago as well. In the middle, you can see purchase to pay. That's the audit we're talking about right now. And to the right, we'll be doing a procurement audit in a couple of years. We just did one in 2018. So there's a pretty good balance between us, the internal audit function, and the external audit function. We're all 2 separate sets of auditors, but we do work together. We communicate. I think that provides a good balance, and we get good coverage here. Any questions on that? Slide 4. Just want to explain briefly the difference between procurement and purchase to pay, and where procurement ends and where purchase to pay starts, so to speak. Now, procurement is really, in simple terms, is the process to select vendors that we're going to purchase from. You can see in the box in the top right, those are different procurement categories that we use to select vendors. When we do that audit, we test those very thoroughly. And the bottom box is the purchase to pay. In this process, this is the process we use to purchase and pay from those selected vendors, basically. So we're processing purchase requisitions, purchase orders. It is the administration of the vendor master, invoice processing, payment processing. I should mention, though, anything under $10,000 does not require any competition. So any questions on that? Slide 5, the scope. So the scope for this audit was a review of the district's purchase to pay cycle, which includes, as I sort of already mentioned, purchase requisition, order processing, invoice processing, management of the vendor master, which is a very important area, payments to the vendors. Now, the scope period for transactions as data was 1/1/19 through June 30th, 2020. It's an 18-month period. Now, during the scope period, you can see there were approximately 27,500 purchase orders, 56,300 invoices, and 29,500 payments issued during that period. So it's quite a bit of activity. So objectives on slide 6. The overall objectives were to ensure that the controls and processes are adequately designed and implemented. First off, we always, for this kind of audit, first thing we always want to make sure is the district assets are adequately safeguarded and not misused and protected. We also want to make sure the transactions are accurately and properly processed, which includes ensuring that the requisitions and purchase orders are actually issued and approved prior to the initiation of the purchase. We do have a recommendation around in that area. I'll talk about that later. We want to make sure purchase orders are not split to circumvent competition rules. As I mentioned, there is a $10,000 threshold. So if you had a PO, say $12,000, and you wanted to avoid those competition rules, you could split it. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. The three-way match process, we want to make sure that's being performed effectively. That's the process where the AP personnel who do all the transactional processing on a daily basis, they match the PO, they match the invoice, they match the receiving documentation to make sure everything matches, and they process the item. We want to make sure there are proper separation of duties. If you move on to slide 7, we want to make sure the processing occurs in a timely and efficient manner. We want to make sure there are no unusual or inappropriate transactions process. Items such as overpayments. We shouldn't see payments that exceed the purchase order or exceed the invoice. Something that we did new this time. We haven't done it before. We looked for unusually large payments in that we took the amounts per vendor and calculated the mean and the standard deviation. So we looked for amounts that were significantly above those amounts, and we investigated in those amounts. It was a good test. We didn't find anything, but it was a good investigation to look at. Any improper payments to employees, payments on suspicious dates. We shouldn't see payments on weekends or holidays or days where we're not expecting to see payments. We want to make sure payments to vendors or there were no payments to vendors and addresses not contained in the vendor master. And we also looked at the SAMS exclusion list that's put out by the federal government. It's a list that bans contracts for certain vendors for federal contracts. We looked at that list and make sure there are no vendors on our listing or our payments. Also, want to make sure the vendor master is properly managed and administered, preventing any inaccuracies, duplication, any type of potential fraud, and so forth. So, any questions? So let's move on to slide 8. Now, as far as our approach and methodology, how did we form the audit? We did obtain and review the district policy and procedural documents. We did a lot of walkthroughs, as we always do. Especially, this is an area that there's a lot of different processes. So we did a walkthroughs a little different this time. So we did most of them through Teams, a lot of video conferences and so forth. So, but it worked pretty well. I think everybody's adapted pretty well. So the areas that we did talk about were, again, managing, administering, and monitoring the vendor master. Again, we did discuss the accounts payable transactions, the three-way match that I mentioned, reviewing, approving, and processing purchase requisition, purchase orders, payments, preventing and detecting duplicate payments, any unusual payments to employees or vendors, and then the monitoring process for purchases initiated prior to the execution of a purchase order, and then any potentially split purchase orders. We walked through that process, their monitoring process for those areas. Now on slide 9, to perform the actual transactional and data testing, we did obtain, I should say, a number of transaction data files. Very large amount of data. Basically, we got the detail for every transaction in the scope period. So the types of files and the tables that we obtained, you can see there's a list of them. I'm not going to go through each one of them. But basically, we took that data and downloaded it into our data mining software called ACL. Audit Command, it stands for Audit Command Language. It's a very effective data mining software. And we use that software to perform numerous tests and analyze the data. I think in all, we actually did 14 individual tests. Excuse me. So anything that popped out in one of those tests, any potential exceptions, those were reviewed and investigated. And we passed those on to the process owner. They took a look at them. I also did some of the research and looked at some of the potential exceptions as well, because I have access to the system. So between myself and the process owner, we were able to resolve most of the items. Any questions? If you go to slide 10, the overall results, you had a satisfactory opinion, a clean opinion. No significant issues were identified. I have to say, this is the third time that I've done this audit here, and this area has definitely improved greatly over the years. They have made a lot of improvements over the controls around the vendor master. That's the kind of the brain center of this whole process. If you can control that, that's a huge step in the right direction. So they've made a lot of improvements. We did identify 2 opportunities for improvement. Invoices dated prior to purchase order date and separation of duties. So if we move on to slide 11, I'll talk about the first issue, the first recommendation. This is invoices dated prior to the purchase order. Now, this is really directed at all to all the departments of the district to be spearheaded by finance, obviously, but it affects all the departments. What we did notice is in regards to invoice dates and purchase order dates, we identified approximately 1,800 purchase orders where the invoice date predated the purchase order date. So theoretically, they're ordering something before the purchase order is created. Now, in their defense, there are times, if it has happened to me, to give you an example, we have the hotline service that we have, and it automatically renews every year. Then the invoice shows up. We haven't done a PO yet. So in that case, the PO is going to be after the invoice. So there are some of those in there, but I think there are also a lot of times where they're just ordering goods before they're doing the PO. So we want to try to eliminate those. So the second item is it's a similar number. The finance department does a quarterly report where they track this kind of activity. Theirs is a little different than what we looked at. Their report identifies transactions in which the invoice date precedes the purchase order approval date. We're just taking it to the same place, but same idea. We saw about 1,170 of those purchase orders per quarter. The report they use is very, very effective. Now, these conditions, what they cause is that obviously you're circumventing approval controls at in some manner here. But the biggest thing is there's a significant increase in the processing workload for accounts payable, because these transactions will not process without a properly approved PO. So these transactions just get hung up. So then accounts payable personnel has to track down an approved PO, and then you have to go back to the originating division and try to get that resolved. So what we're recommending on slide 12 is that finance continue the efforts they've already have underway, and continue efforts to communicate with district personnel and enforce the requirements to issue a properly approved PO before you order goods. And we would like to see them place an even stronger emphasis on and leverage the quarterly reports that they have developed, because those reports really do pinpoint where the issues are. They list the transactions by vendor, by department, by person, so you can really see where the hot spots are. I think they can really use that report and kind of really decrease this number. So, any questions on that? Slide 13. This is the second item and last item: separation of duties. Similar to the previous item, this really does apply to all the departments. It's spearheaded by the finance department. As I mentioned earlier, we did obtain all the transactions from the scope period, and we tested each one of them basically for their SOD setup, their separation of duties stuff, who approved it, and who, through the process, and who reviewed and so forth, and who received. So through that, we identified an opportunity to approve the setup of duties. Ideally, it is a best practice to separate the role of initiating and requesting a purchase of goods and services from the role of receiving the goods and services, especially for goods. We're really concerned about the goods. Of the 27,500 purchase orders that occurred during the scope period, we identified approximately 8,500 in which the personnel that initiated the transaction also received the goods and the assistant man probably physically received the goods. Now, you should understand there are compensating controls in place, such as purchase order and requisition approvals in the middle of the process. But those controls are not always adequate in mitigating the risk here. So that's why we're making this recommendation. Slide 14. Our recommendation for this item is in an effort to further strengthen these processes. We are suggesting the management perform a cost-benefit analysis of separating the roles of initiating the purchase from the roles of receiving the goods. Now, again, we're really concerned about the goods, not so much the services. The risk around the goods is much greater. And based on the result of that cost-benefit analysis, management should make the improvements that make sense. I don't really think they're going to be able to limit, completely remove this practice. I think it's too hard to do. But I think if they're going to limit a large portion of it and reduce the number of these transactions, I think that will go a long way to reduce the risk in this area. So, anybody have any questions?
Chad, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. When I read in the what? Hold on a second. There's a feedback. When I read in the paper about individuals who committed frauds on either businesses or organizations, it always seems like the theme that I get out of it is that there are false vendors. And as I was listening to you, it just struck me how difficult it must be, even if you've separated the functions. The person who's approving it, I mean, you really have to be paying attention in terms of what you're approving and whether it's an actual vendor and when it's being received. And
Yeah,
I guess I'm just sort of perplexed how you set up controls that really get at that potential fraud.
I completely agree with you, and that's one of the reasons we focus a lot on the management of the vendor master and what gets entered into the vendor master and the controls around the vendor master, because we don't pay anybody who's not in the vendor master. So we have to make sure that anything that gets entered into that system is legitimate, and that's why since I got here, and Marion's group has really made an effort to really strengthen the controls around that area. We used to have a lot more people used to have access to the vendor master. We've reduced that greatly and strengthened the controls around the supplier master. I think that goes a long way to reducing the risks there. So it's not going to be foolproof, but that's one way of doing it. So,
thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Okay, if there's no other questions, that is all we had for the audit committee.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next meeting is tentatively scheduled for March 30th, 2021. We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, that concludes the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Trustee Evans will let you know when we're ready to go.
Thank you. Order the 215th meeting of the Program Management Committee. Can I get a roll call, please?
We will note that all the trustees are present.
All right, could I get a motion to approve the minutes of the February 2nd, 2021 meeting?
So moved. Second.
All right, next item is the Engineering Department agenda.
Good morning, trustees. We're going to go through the agenda that you'll be approving next Thursday night, March 11th. The first item you'll be discussing is the Earth City Shoreline Pump Station replacement. This action appropriates some additional funds for an ongoing construction project being constructed by Kelp Contracting. The work being done on this contract is the construction of a replacement pump station, approximately 305 feet of sanitary sewers and appurtenances. The purpose of the project is to replace an existing deteriorated pump station that has reached the end of its useful life. This supplemental appropriation of $150,000 is necessary due to additional costs associated with dewatering. After the initial dewatering was set up to install the pump station, additional wet wells were required to draw down the water to allow for the excavation. So this funding covers that additional cost of the additional dewatering wells and the running of those wells while we're doing the work. Are there any questions? All right. The next item is the CSO volume reduction green infrastructure projects for the Webster School Senior Apartments. This authorized staff to enter into an agreement with Webster School Senior Apartments LP to provide financial assistance through the Green Infrastructure Grant Program for the construction of green infrastructure. The purpose of the project is to reduce combined sewer overflows to the Mississippi River per the long-term control plan and the consent decree. This project will reduce runoff volume with the removal of impervious surfaces and additional amended soils. The total cost of this is estimated at $264,000, and the Webster School Senior Apartments is requesting $264,600 reimbursement for the cost of this. In your packet, there will be a description and showing where the project is. As you can see, it's in the Old North area, just north of downtown. Large facility, removing a tremendous amount. I think the site was completely paved, so that'll do a lot to reduce combined sewer overflows to the combined sewer areas in our combined sewer system in that area. Are there any questions? All right. The next item is the East Watson Sanitary Relief Project. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the construction of approximately 4,500 lineal feet of sanitary sewers, 8 to 24 inch in diameter. The purpose of the project is to reduce building backups and relieve overcharged sanitary sewers. The project will provide for the elimination of one constructed sanitary sewer overflow required to be removed by the consent decree. The district received 6 bids on this project. Our low bid was received from Above and Below Contracting. The bid received was below our design estimate, and our appropriation of $1.95 million, which includes contingencies and utility relocation totaling $330,000, is below our original budget for the project. Above and Below is committed to 17.62% African American MBE on the project. That currently meets our 17% goal for the project. Next item is the Harlem Baitin Relief Phase 4, Goodfellow to Hamilton. This action appropriates additional funds and authorizes staff to amend an intergovernmental agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This ordinance authorizes us to enter into agreement with the Corps of Engineers to administer and construct the project in our capital program. This project consists of the construction of approximately 7,200 feet of 12-inch to 48-inch diameter storm and sanitary sewers and 3,000 feet of sewer lining in the North City area. This project will reduce combined sewer overflows, taking separated flows to the Harlem Baitin detention basin. In our agreement and working with the Corps since the inception, we've received approximately $23 million in federal funding has been allocated to improve our combined sewer system, with the Corps bidding and awarding and managing those various construction projects. The Corps advises that additional federal funding for the next phase of the effort is currently pending. The act requires that MSD be a local sponsor, and we provide 25% match on those current projects that we work on them with. The board action that we're taking right now appropriates $600,000 for utility relocation associated with the project that they're currently working on, and authorizes the staff to enter into agreement for that work. One of the things with the Corps, working with, partnering with the Corps, is that they are not the host agency, which would be MSD in this case, is responsible to make sure all the utilities are relocated. So we're responsible for that portion of the funding. As you can see, by $23 million, we're working with the Corps. That's a good chunk of money that we're getting helped out with there. And we hope to see that money continue. Next item is Market Street green infrastructure, entrance and landscaping improvements right here to our headquarters. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of entrance and landscaping improvements with 3 rain gardens and native landscaping, parking lot resurfacing, new sidewalks, and a new ADA ramp here to the front of our building. And it does include 467 feet of 12-inch diameter storm sewer. The purpose of this project is to implement CSO volume reduction green infrastructure right here on our campus. And we're also going to be including water quality education. In other words, our headquarters here will be an education center. We'll have signage and things such out to kind of identify what we're doing here at the thing, which we get credit for with our stormwater permit and for our green infrastructure program. The district received 3 bids for this work. The low bid was from Cosney Wagner Incorporated. The bid was slightly above our estimate, and our appropriation of $1.85 million is above the budget for the project. Our budget was $1.6 million. On this particular project, we're taking the funding from 2 separate sources. The district has a stormwater regulatory fund. That's where we're taking the $1.85 million for the project. That's the education piece, and that we get credit for. And then additionally, we're taking just under $300,000 from our green infrastructure, similar to where we give grants. We appropriate the fund for those grants. The district will be using $300,000 for that project. We had accounted for it when we made our initial appropriation for the project. In your packet, if you want to get a look at what the project's going to look like, obviously there'll be some disruption here at the headquarters for a while, but there's 2 drawings. Basically, to the left is a rendering of the work that's going to take place. If you look at the top left drawing, you look over on the left-hand side, you'll see a new handicap ramp. Right now, our handicap, if somebody, a handicap wants to come in and pay a bill, they've got to go to the back entrance and come in. But we're going to set up our front entrance, and then obviously you can see just to the left there will be additional handicap. The area that you walk up right now that's all concrete will become more of rain garden capture, and that's the area where we'll have signage and such that will educate the public on that. So similar to what we've done at some of our rain gardens, provided educational material, we want to do that right here at the headquarters. I call it practice what you preach type things is what we're going to do here at the headquarters. But this is something we've looked at. If you remember last year, we replaced the sidewalks out on Market and Jefferson. Those are pervious sidewalks. In other words, they've got a drainage system underneath that captures stormwater. So these are the types of methods we see a lot that are going on, and obviously we give grants for some of that work right here at the district. Are there any questions? Thank you. Next item is the Riverside and Yarnell Relief Replacement Project. This appropriates additional funds for ongoing construction contract with Understall Contracting. This was a planned appropriation. It was a larger project we're funding over several years. This is the last and final appropriation for this work. The work being done consists of the construction of approximately 5,600 linear feet of sanitary sewers, 12 to 42-inch diameter, and appurtenance, and the rehabilitation of 4 manholes and 5 point repairs. The purpose of this project is to remove and replace an existing failing sanitary system. Again, this is a partial funding request. It's the final funding request. The planned supplemental of $1,063,000 to bring the total appropriation for the overall project to $7.7 million and fully fund the construction for the project. All right, the next item is the Spring Avenue Sanitary Relief. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the construction of approximately 2,580 feet of sanitary sewers varying from 6 to 48 inch in diameter. The purpose of the project is to alleviate wet weather building backups and sanitary sewer surcharging during wet weather events, and it does again provide for the elimination of one constructed overflow required by the consent decree. The district received 8 bids on this project. The low bid was from Waymire Farms Incorporated. The bid was below our designer's estimate, and our appropriation of $1.5 million, which includes $363,000 for utility relocation and contingencies, is just above the budget for the project. Waymire Farms is committed to 17.1% African American MBE participation on the project, which meets the goal for the project. Next item is a South County Relief Force Main replacement. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the construction of approximately 4,100 feet of 12-inch diameter sanitary force main and 11 feet of 30-inch diameter storm sewers and appurtenances. The purpose of this project is to replace an existing force main which is deteriorated to the point of failure. Again, the contract, we received 6 bids on this project. The low bid was from J.H. Barra Construction Company. Our appropriation for the project is $1.35 million, is below our budget. The bid was also below the design estimate for the project. We are appropriating additional $150,000 in this contract for emergency repair. This project, we've had several emergencies on it, so we want to have some contingency funding should we have to make a quick fix to a break during the construction and the replacement. J.H. Barra is committed to 17.05% African American MBE for the project, which meets the 17% goal. The next item is the maintenance yard vehicle storage building. This is located up in Ferguson. This is we refer to as our mentored yard. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the construction of a maintenance yard storage building for 10 Vector trucks, a truck wash bay, a fueling station, and other appurtenances. The purpose of this project is to provide an inside storage for 10 of our Vector trucks to keep liquid and contents from freezing during the winter time. Again, this is at our mentored yard property. The district received 4 bids on this project. The low bid was from Gershenson Construction Company. The bid was below our design estimate, and our appropriation of $2,650,000 is above our original budget. The reason we're above budget is after planning, it was decided to add the addition of a diesel fuel and unleaded fueling station at the new site. I don't know if you recall, we had purchased some property across the street from our current building from the school district, the Ferguson School District. And we have a fueling station at our current site, but it was in need of repairs. So we're actually just going to build a new one and then abandon the old one as part of this project. And that's what caused the additional cost for the project. On the MBE side, this is a building construction project. So the goal for this project is 30% African American and Hispanic American. Gershenson has met that 30% goal on the project. We do have Brett on the call if there's any questions about this facility and the plans for it. All right, thank you. Next item is the Martini Creek Stream Bank Stabilization. This action appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of construction of approximately 768 feet of modular block wall, 458 feet of sanitary sewers from 12 to 48 inch in diameter. The purpose of the project is to alleviate stream bank erosion on the Martini Creek between Farwick and Gold Valley Drive, and it's in unincorporated North St. Louis County. The district received 4 bids on this project. Our low bid was from Gershenson Construction Company. The bid was below our design estimate, and our appropriation of $1,325,000 is below the budget for the project. This appropriation is taken both from sanitary funds and stormwater funds for both those types of work. Gershenson is committed to 17.06 African American participation, which meets our goal for the project. The next item is the stormwater infrastructure repairs. This appropriates funds and authorizes staff to enter into a construction contract. The work to be done consists of the rehabilitation of approximately 15,297 feet of storm sewers from 18 to 42 inch using the cured in place pipe method. The purpose of this project is to reduce pipe collapses, block sewers, street and yard flooding, and rehabilitate older and damaged and deteriorated storm sewers throughout the district. The district received 3 bids for this particular work. The low bid was from In Situ Form Technologies. The bid was below our design estimate, and our appropriation of $1.8 million is below the budget for the project by $1.2 million. And the reason I answered that, I bring that up, we purposely set this contract up at the $2 million level so we could utilize the additional $1 million fund on the next project I'm going to discuss. Before I do that, though, In Situ Form agreed to meet the goal for the African American. They're providing 17.16% participation on the project. The next item is a supplemental appropriation to our stormwater infrastructure repairs. Earlier this fiscal year, the district appropriated $5 million for repairs throughout the district for small repair contracts. This is our under $50,000 program where we make small repairs to our systems throughout the district. And what we found as we went through the year, we had less projects for lining, which was the previous projects, but we saw an increase in the number of point repairs we needed on the system. So in order to not run out of funds before the end of the fiscal year, we're doing a supplemental appropriation, which is basically the shortfall that we had on the previous. So we're asking for a supplemental appropriation of $1 million, which will bring the total repair program to a total of $6 million. This will allow us to continue to keep doing repair works on the storm system before next year's fiscal year, where we can appropriate the additional dollars. So basically, all the dollars were set aside this fiscal year for, actually there was a slide in there, I apologize. Original appropriation was $5 million, and we had $3 million for lining, which was a total of $8 million. So basically, we're going to appropriate $7.8 million for those 2 projects for the year. Are there any questions? All right. One last item. It is a maintenance yard vehicle storage building. This is a part of the design services during construction for that project that we talked about earlier. This appropriates additional funds and authorize staff to amend a design contract with Crawford Murphy Tilley for the design or the construction phase services for the Minter storage facility. The appropriation is for $120,000 for engineering services during construction and additional design services during construction, and it's actually $80,000 below what we had budgeted. The construction phase services include attending monthly construction field meetings, construction field surveys, the review of shop drawings and equipment. There's going to be quite a bit of that on this project, and responding to design questions while the contractor is working on the project. Are there any questions? Mr. Evans, that concludes the engineering department agenda items.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other business?
We do not.
Next meeting for Tuesday, March 8th, 2021. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Thank you.
Trustee Fair, we'll let you know when we're ready for the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Welcome to the 264th meeting of the Finance Committee of Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. We have a roll call, please.
Okay, all trustees are present. We'll note that in the minutes.
All right. And can I get a motion for approval of the minutes from February 2nd?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. Next, we have our quarterly pension update from Ann.
Yep, so Peter Lemick and Mike Comstock from Aon are on the line, and they are going to walk through the pension market and pension performance for the fourth quarter of 2020 and the year. All right, take it away. Thanks, Aon.
Sounds good. So this is Peter Lemick speaking. Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly. The title of our presentation is the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District Employees Pension Plan, fourth quarter 2020. And we'll start out with just an update or a look back at the market environment that was in 2020 and really how remarkable it was. And also provide a quick update on the 2021 year-to-date market environment as well before getting into the fourth quarter performance and year-to-date performance update as well for both the pension and the two DC plans as well. So looking at page 4, just putting into a couple of bullet points, a couple of the more staggering figures that we saw back in calendar year 2020. We saw, one, the fastest bear market and the fastest rebound ever. It only took 33 days from the top to the lows in the markets back in the first quarter of 2020. However, the subsequent rebound was pretty breathtaking as well, and certainly it was beneficial to the pension over the long run. We also saw record low interest rates. That's changed a bit here in 2021. We have a slide showing that rates have started to increase a bit, particularly on the longer end of the yield curve. And then also kind of a staggering figure on the right would be the U.S. GDP, the quarter-to-quarter change that we saw in Q2, minus 30% in U.S. GDP over the second quarter, with the subsequent snapback to over 33% in the third quarter of 2020. Page 5 takes a look at how the markets reacted to all this news in 2020. What we're looking at here is the daily return to the S&P 500, and the time frame that we're looking at on the x-axis there is from the end of the global financial crisis in 2009 all the way through the end of 2020, and you can see that that bolded yellow line there is showing how strong of a run it was in U.S. equities from the end of the global financial crisis to right before the COVID-19 sell-off in the first quarter of 2020, where we saw a 34% drop in the S&P 500. However, markets have rebounded quite staggeringly on the other end of that of the COVID-19 sell-off, and that market rebound, particularly with more risk-oriented assets, so equities and credit type strategies, has continued so far here in 2021. On the following page, what we're looking at here is major capital markets updates in that beige background color. That would be trailing period returns for capital markets through the end of the fourth quarter 2020. And then on the far right of the table, with that light blue background, that's a 2021 year-to-date update of how markets have continued so far here in 2021. So looking at that far right column in the first row, global stocks have continued to be positive, up 4% on a year-to-date basis. Really what's been driving returns are a couple of markets that weren't particularly the winners in the first part of the COVID-19 shutdowns. However, they've really come back in a very strong way. U.S. small cap stocks, Russell 2000, up 11.5% on a year-to-date basis. The pension has exposure there with a couple of funds, one being the Kennedy Mid Cap Fund and then the Times Square Small Cap Fund. Both of those managers performing quite well, not just so far here in 2021, but also fourth quarter of 2020 as well. And then non-U.S. emerging market stocks. Emerging markets have held up quite well, particularly in the fourth quarter of 2020 and starting things off here in 2021. Emerging markets have been positive compared to their other regional counterparts, such as U.S. equities and U.S. large cap equities and international developed. The one negative number you'll see here is U.S. investment grade bonds. As I mentioned, what we have seen here is rates increasing so far in 2021. And as those interest rates increase, typically you're holding the investor holdings and fixed income, those depreciate and vice versa. As rates come down, appreciation tends to happen with fixed income holdings. On page 7, this is a look just visually of what the yield curve has done so far in 2021. That bolded black line here, those are U.S. Treasury yield curve rates as of February 25th. And then you compare that to the royal blue line, those are the end of the year 12/31 Treasury yields. And you can see on the 10-year maturity, up 61 basis points, the yield, 20-year, 80 basis points, 30-year, up nearly 70 basis points. Those are pretty large gains or large increases, particularly on the longer end of the yield curve. The pension actually utilizes more intermediate duration type fixed income. So when you compare maybe the pension compared to broader fixed income markets, that more intermediate, shorter duration type positioning has been beneficial on a relative basis. So maybe some losses here to start 2021, however, not as much as you would see for those investors invested on the longer end of the yield curve, such as a 20 and 30-year portion of the Treasury yield. Maybe flipping ahead to behind page 10, we can get into the quarterly performance update. What we're looking at here on this table are total pension returns as of the end of the fourth quarter 2020. The total plan returned 9.7% over the fourth quarter, bringing the calendar year 2020 return to a very strong 12.8%. The pension did a very good job of maintaining long-term asset allocations during the volatility of 2020 and being able to use monthly benefit payments and any pension contributions to rebalance asset classes back to target. And that's been beneficial to overall pension plan returns as money's been moved into asset classes where sell-offs were significant in the early part of 2020, and then money's also been sourced from those asset classes that returned quite well later in 2020 to meet monthly benefit payments. So very strong returns from the total pension. On page 11, we put this on a historical market value perspective, and what we're looking at here is the total plan AUM through the end of the fourth quarter. That's up to $327 million in total plan assets. That's a increase of nearly $31 million over the trailing one-year period. That incorporates about $37 million in investment gains and about $6.5 million in distributions over the calendar year. And then since the end of the first quarter 2020, after the market sell-offs in March, we have seen a nearly $74 million gain in total pension assets from the end of the first quarter through the end of 2020. Page 12 is a look at the pension asset allocation versus policy targets. The asset classes remain within their allowable IPS policy ranges. On page 13, we're taking a look at the trailing period performance, and just a couple of numbers to note here. Very noted the very strong returns at the overall total plan asset class level. When you get into domestic equities, you can see total small cap really being additive to calendar year returns, particularly over the fourth quarter, then up nearly 22% over the trailing one-year period. Times Square small cap growth has really been the main driver of growth here. As I mentioned before, small cap equities have done quite well in the fourth quarter of 2020 and so far here in 2021. Times Square has been able to capitalize on that with over 36% return calendar year 2020. And then within international equity at the asset class level, up nearly 12.7% over the trailing one-year basis, while Morgan Stanley Emerging Markets did underperform its benchmark a little bit over 2020 on an absolute basis, was additive to returns, particularly when compared to international developed markets. International equities were up about 15% compared to 11.5% return from international equity. Then on page 14, the total fixed income portfolio, your fixed income mandates have navigated 2020 very tactfully and skillfully. You can see over the trailing one-year period, 9.2% return at the asset class level, outperforming the benchmark of 6.4%. Income research and Prudential Core Plus bonds, these are your more conservative fixed income type holdings. Both were really strong over 2020. Both managers are able to invest in, or were able to take advantage of credit spreads really widening in the first quarter of 2020. When those credit spreads widened, that creates an opportunity for higher yield and credit issuances in those spaces going forward. Those managers were able to move some money into that area, to that space in 2020, and rates started coming down, and credit spreads started coming down in 2020, benefiting the appreciation of those fixed income holdings. The last couple of items I'll note on this page would be the footnote at the bottom. The total pension has returned an additional estimated 1.3% on a year-to-date basis through the end of February. And then just a reminder to the trustees that the asset allocation is purposefully placed in as a result of the asset liability study we did back in 2019. We continually have discussions with Tim and John, and our asset liability team that conducted the study last year to continue to make sure the total pension asset allocation remains appropriate for the circumstances of the plan and the current market environment as well. We continue to think the current policy allocation is appropriate and remains appropriate going forward. Let me pause there and see if there's any questions before touching on the deferred compensation and defined contribution plan.
Can you review the fees? And I wanted to know if the returns are net of fees.
I'm sorry, I'm having some trouble hearing.
Yeah, so Peter, he asked about the fees and then also whether the returns are net of fees. So Jim, yes, we always present returns net of fees. And
yes, that's correct.
There is a slide somewhere in here, Peter, isn't there? Usually there's one on the fees.
Here's your team. Yes.
Yeah, I want to ask when you give your report, I mean, even if it's just to take 15 or 20 seconds, if you could review fees, I think it's important for the pension board to monitor fees, which it's hard to do if you don't cover it briefly in your report.
Jim, it's on page 18. And we have a slide in every report that is a fee comparison. So it shows the fees of our plan versus an institutional peer comparison. So Peter, I don't know if you want to have any comments on that or want to walk through it.
Yeah, so page 18 is a look at the your plan's investment managers' fees compared to their institutional peers of similar sized mandates, and the bottom line there would be the weighted average fees of the investment management fees utilized by the MSD pension compared to their institutional peers. And you can see, for the most part, a little bit less and in line compared to their institutional peers. And as you mentioned, Trustee Singer and Tim, that all of the returns that we show you in this report are net of investment management fees.
Thank you.
And similarly, on page 19, we also show the defined contribution and deferred compensation plan fees. These have identical investment lineups. We compare these fees as well to their institutional peer comparisons, where you can see at the bottom as well, the total combined weighted average fee versus the institutional peers.
Thank you.
So maybe just a couple of last comments on the DC plans. On page 15, we're looking at the combined assets in the pie charts on the top, and then a breakdown of the two planned assets in the table on the bottom. No major changes in the participant-driven asset allocation for either of the plans. I would note that the total AUM of the combined DC plans has increased by about $25 million over the trailing 1 year period. Then on pages 16 and 17, these are the investment manager or investment fund returns that are available to participants within the DC plans. Tier 1, these are your target date funds. So those participants who want to simply contribute to the plan and then forget about it. They don't want to make any sort of individual plays or consideration on or views on the market environment. They want to invest and have Vanguard invest those monies into a diversified portfolio for them, and that portfolio goes down what's called a glide path and gets less risky as those participants near their respective retirement ages. On page 17, tier 2 are the passive mandates that are available to participants. So those participants who simply want to gain exposure to broad capital markets at a very cheap rate, that this is available. These options are available for them to invest in. And then tier 3 are the active funds within the combined DC plans, which have across the board have performed quite well lately versus their respective benchmarks through the end of 2020. So the next couple of slides are those fee tables that we've already touched upon, and I'll pause again there to see if there are any questions.
Looks like no questions.
I'm hearing none. That was the extent of the materials we had to present today.
Okay, and then the appendix just contains, I think these are typically things that we show in the appendix, some comparison of our plan versus others. As you can see on slides 22 and 23, we're a little bit more conservative in our return assumptions than other public plans. On slide 23, you can see that our funded status is higher than most public plans. And there's a few other kind of support slides in here. So there are no questions on any of the appendix slides. I think we are done with the pension review. Last chance for questions. All right, Peter and Mike, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Right.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. Okay, Trustee Fair, I've got the next couple of items. I'll just move forward if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is a bank resolution. This is a proposed resolution that will be presented to you at the board meeting next week. It is to add a bank, Huntington National Bank, as an approved depository bank of the district. The intent is really not to add them as a depository bank, but as a broker. But all of our depository banks can also serve as brokers. So this is a bank that has talked to us. They're based in Columbus, Ohio. They've talked to us about being a potential source of investments for us. So when we invest our operating funds, we go out to a pool of brokers. We have a number of them. We let them know how much money we need to invest in kind of the time frame and type of investment we're looking for. And they come back as kind of like a blind bid or auction, and they let us know what they have available and at what price, and then we choose the best price that fits our needs. And so when we add banks to that group, it just increases the competition and helps us make sure that we can get the best rates available. And so that's why we add banks to this list from time to time. Any questions about this resolution?
Yeah. How many banks are on this?
We have, so we have a list that I can send to you. The entire list is not active, but typically when we send out a bid for investments, there's anywhere from 10 to 15 banks on that list.
And how many of those banks?
I'm sorry, you were cutting out.
How many of those are local?
There are a number of local banks. I don't know the exact number, but Commerce Bank we deal with locally. There's a handful of others, but I can get you a list of the local banks.
Do we provide a incentive for keeping that money in local banks?
Well, so what we're talking about right now are our investments. So we're looking for example, a broker to sell us Treasury securities or agencies or that sort of thing. And so the safekeeping is done through U.S. Bank. There was an RFP for that kind of business, so they won that. We do have, U.S. Bank is national. Most of the people that we deal with are not local, although this trust branch, I believe, is local.
It is.
Typically, we do not provide an incentive for local, although we do have some local banks. For example, Simmons Bank is a local bank that has been looking for deposits, and they offer a good interest rate. And so we do have some cash, for example, with them. So we do look for some local opportunities to keep deposits, and there's a few local banks that we talk to in that regards.
Do the banks get community reinvestment credit or do we look at that as criteria?
We do look at this scoring, the Community Reinvestment Act scoring, as part of the bid process. So, for example, this would have just predated you by a few months probably, but U.S. Bank recently won a bid for banking services. They were the incumbent. They already had it, and that's mostly based on things like pricing and service, but we do look at community reimbursement scoring as well, and that was part of the presentation we made to the trustees, was how they had scored on that. Using just our Missouri scoring.
Good.
Any other questions on the banking? All right, the next item is also mine. This is the portfolio review. We do this every month. It's the 4-grid panel. Our portfolio at the end of February was a little over $730 million. That's actually a slight increase from the previous year. Usually you'll see that balance go down unless we're borrowing money, but at the beginning of the year, we're usually taking in tax receipts, which can help offset some of the capital outflows. And then I think in this month also, there was a timing of some cash flows that show a higher portfolio in February. Versus the benchmark, our yield to maturity is still higher. As we talk about every month, the benchmark invests its entire portfolio every month, and since short-term rates, and we're talking generally 1 to 3 year investments for the benchmark, are very low, the benchmark is very low. Our portfolio has a little bit shorter maturity, but we don't turn over the entire portfolio every month. So we have investments that we put to work, a year or 2 years ago when rates are a little bit higher. So the yield to maturity for our portfolio is higher than the benchmark while rates are going down, and then we'll lag as it goes back up. But we very high quality instruments, same credit rating as the benchmark, even though our weighted average maturity, which is the WAM, is a little shorter. Sector allocation in the top right, you can see that we're within our policy limits for all of the sectors we invest in, which are primarily Treasury, U.S. Treasuries and agencies, some of the most high quality paper out there. In fund summary, you can see very simple snapshot of where the funds are at this time. Most of them are in operating funds. We do have some debt project and reserve funds that are restricted from use for operations. Same with the SRF operating funds, which are for capital projects, and for the funding mechanisms or the bond borrowing mechanisms that we have for funding capital. And then the maturity distribution in the bottom right is simply a comparison of the maturity of the benchmark that we compare to, which is in red, versus our benchmark, which is in blue. And again, you can see that our benchmark is much shorter because we use those funds daily for operations and for capital spending and that sort of thing. Any questions on the portfolio review? All right, then the next items are all Marion, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Thank you, Tim. So I would call your attention to the report that's titled The Finance Key Performance Indicators. I will start with the box in the top left-hand corner, our budget status forecast. Overall, our budgeted expenditures are about $34 million, or our actual expenditures, are about $34 million less than what we budgeted. That's our forecast. The bulk of that comprises a favorable variance in our capital program budget. We are projected to spend approximately $31.5 million less than budget. Our debt service and our operating funds are basically projected to come in right at budget, with our operating expenditures actually projected to come in a little under budget by about 1.7 million. Moving over to the box in the top right-hand corner, this depicts our FY21 user charge forecast, which is basically our wastewater billings. Our residential billings are projected to be about $600,000 more than budgeted. However, our commercial revenues, which has been trending this way throughout the fiscal year, are projected to be $15.8 million less than what we budgeted. That is primarily due to reductions in usage. As you're aware, during the pandemic, we had several commercial customers, such as hotels, schools, universities, that either shut down or reduced their operations. And so we're seeing the impact of that this fiscal year. And we did anticipate, when we talked to the board back in April, we did anticipate that we would see a decline in usage. Moving down to the lower left-hand corner, the chart that depicts our debt service coverage ratios. Basically what this chart is showing is that our debt service coverage actually exceeds the targets that we've set, as well as the covenant requirements that are in our bond documents. So we're doing well there. And then finally, the box in the lower right-hand corner depicts our total delinquencies and our average collection period. Our target for our average collection period is 45 days. Right now, we're at about 57 days. And this has pretty much been consistent from FY20 to FY21. So are there any questions that I can answer regarding the report? Okay, if not, I will move on to the next item, which is our debt service transfer and an appropriation resolution. So the Finance Department conducts an annual review of adjustments in our actual and budgeted debt service payments. And these adjustments are primarily, or the differences are primarily due to the timing of when we issue bonds as to compared to how we budget that issuance, as well as the actual borrowing costs, interest rates that we get on bonds compared to the budget rates. And the purpose of this review is to ensure that we have adequate amounts in each of our debt service funds to cover our debt service payments. And so this resolution presents some transfers to and from various debt service funds and also to our general fund. The net result is that we've been able to return, or are expected to return, about $224,000 to our general fund. And this indicates that our budgeted debt service was more than what our actual debt service will turn out to be. So are there any questions regarding the resolution? Okay, thank you. So I will move on to the next resolution, which involves a proposed transfer from our water backup fund to our wastewater emergency fund. The board recently approved 2 emergency repair ordinances that totaled about $2.8 million. And as a result of that, we need to transfer some fund balance into our wastewater emergency fund so that we maintain a minimum balance of $500,000 that was set by the board, as well as to cover the $2.8 million of expenditures. So there are some unencumbered funds that exist in our water backup fund. And so what this resolution is requesting is that the board approve a transfer of $590,000 from our water backup fund to our wastewater emergency fund. And if approved, this will appear on the next board agenda item. Are there any questions that I can answer? Okay, hearing none, I will move on to the Adjustment Review Committee report. Our wastewater ordinance requires that our adjustment review committee review any adjustments to wastewater billings or account adjustments that exceed $5,000. And so I present this report to the board on a quarterly basis. So the report that I am going to cover today is for the period of October of 2020 through December of 2020. So as you will note on the report, we had a grand total of 43 account adjustments that totaled approximately $540,500. The bulk of those adjustments, I'm looking in the first section there in the section labeled adjustments. The bulk of those adjustments are water agency adjustments. And what those are adjustments to volume charges that are billed by the various water utilities. Those could go up or down. What we saw this quarter is we had 22 adjustments that resulted in a reduction in billings of approximately $346,000. So the water utilities send that consumption information to us that we use to bill, and so we make the corresponding adjustments to the customer's accounts. We also had 7 adjustments totaling approximately $104,000 that related to adjustments in extra surcharge strength calculations that are performed by our Department of Environmental Compliance. So again, we made those corresponding adjustments to customer accounts. We had one sheriff's sale that required us to write off an account balance of approximately $7,800. And so again, we had a grand total of about $540,000 of adjustments. On the last section of the report, you'll see a category that's labeled others. These are actually billings that we do, but we enter those billings as adjustments. So we had 3 billings to the Bridgeton landfill, which totaled $30,000. We also had 2 billings to the Missouri American Water Company for their share of our operating cost at our Lower Merrimack treatment plant. So the grand total of those 5 adjustments resulted in additional revenues of about $883,000 to the district during the quarter. Are there any questions regarding the Adjustment Review Committee report? Okay. Hearing none, Trustee Fair, that completes the items that I have on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
So the next meeting is tentative scheduled Tuesday, March 30th, 2021. We have a motion to
adjourn.
So moved.
sorry,
Thank you.
Second.
meeting is concluded.
All right.
Trustee Wilson will get things ready for the Stakeholders Committee.
Thank you.
We are ready to go.
Thank you. I'll call the Stakeholder Relations Committee meeting of March 2021 to order. Can I get a roll call, please?
All right, we'll note that all trustees are present. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no comments by the chair. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the February committee meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. those minutes are approved. The first business item today is discussion by Tracy Coleman regarding an ordinance for civil service rule change. Ms.
Thank you,
Coleman?
trustees. Are you guys able to hear me okay? We're going to start with proposed ordinance 15642 of the civil service rule changes. The civil service rules require some changes, trustees, after we had the union negotiations, and part of the collective bargaining agreement arrangements were that the civil service rules need to be updated based on those agreements. The rules of changes that I'm going to go over today were also reviewed by the Civil Service Commission in a public meeting. They reviewed and approved those changes, and we're presenting to...
Excuse me, Ms.
Yes.
Ms. Coleman. Can everybody hear?
Are you guys having difficulty hearing me?
I'm having trouble. Mike,
Yeah, I'm having trouble.
Maybe just a little closer to the mic.
or turn it up. Can they turn that up for?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you able to hear me if I speak this close to the mic?
Go ahead and try it again, Tracy, and see if the trustees online can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm so sorry for the difficulty, guys. Are you able to hear me at this time?
I can hear better now.
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. So again, I'm talking about ordinance 15642. That particular ordinance is for the changes for the civil service rules. Part of the union negotiations, we concluded those negotiations and then made updates to the collective bargaining agreement. With the collective bargaining agreement changes, it required changes to the civil service rules. Those rules were presented to the Civil Service Commission. That commission, in a public meeting, reviewed and approved them, and I'll be going over those changes today. You guys should have samples of those rules in front of you, and the trustees that are remote, those were emailed to you or they were sent via courier, so you should have those in front of you as well. I'm going to start with Rule 1 of the definitions, the changes that we had to those definitions. Rule 1.30 on regarding immediate family deletes the references to living in an employee's household. And it added information regarding step-grandchildren and step-grandparents to the definition of immediate family. Rule 1.47 added a definition for rehire. And a rehire is any individual who has been hired to the district after a 2-year separation from the district. Rule 1.50 added a definition for relative. And a relative is being defined as someone who is an individual living in an employee's household. Rule .154 added an additional explanation for retirement. The current definition only included the pension. The new definition for retirement includes the plan that's available for employees that were not qualified to participate in the pension. A definition was added for training program adjustment, which is the assignment of a trainee based off their successful completion of a training program. I'm going to move on to Rule 3, which is Organization for Personnel Administration. Rule 3.3D as in dog was regard to the Civil Service Commission meetings. What was changed in that was we replaced the word shall with may. So the sentence reads as follows: regular meetings may be held on such dates as determined by the commission, versus the previous definition with shall. Rule 4.5I is the disqualification of applicants. It adds a new item to the list of disqualifications for applicants. That item now is in the course of separation. If the employee agreed not to reapply, that would also be a reason for disqualification of that application. Rule 6, which is the certification and appointment. Rule 62J, filing of vacancies and appointments from rehire. That rule now clarifies that a rehire who is separated for more than 2 years is not eligible for the status of reinstatement. Are there any questions so far, trustees? Okay. Moving on to Rule 8.1, discrimination and favoritism prohibited. What was added to that definition is the protected classes of sexual orientation, familial status, ancestry, national origin, race, age, sex, creed, and color from protected categories that cannot be discriminated against. Rule 8.2a, that rule has received no changes, but during the public meeting, there was a request to adjust that rule so that contributions from employees can be made to political campaigns. Our position is that there was a misinterpretation of that rule because that rule does not prohibit employees from making contributions. So that was clarified in the public meeting. Rule 8.5, that rule had a title change. It went from relatives and members of household to employment relationship conflicts. So just a simple change in title. And it adds throughout that definition the term relative, which was defined earlier. A portion of that rule, which is Rule 8.5, was brought up in the public meeting as having an adjustment. There was a request for the removal of the HR employment restriction that currently exists. The district and the commission both said that that did not need to be changed, and that was supported. So that's what we're presenting is no change to the latter part of that rule for 8.5. Rule 8.6 deleted the reference to leaving, to having vacation leave earned during the payroll period. Now, vacation is an upfront annual accrual versus being earned each payroll period. Rule 8.7 added HR as a required notifier of any changes. Previously, before, when employees' contact information or updates was only for the supervisor per the civil service rules. HR has been added to that, according to Rule 8.7. Going on to Rule 9, which is 9.3D, performance and appraisals of reassigned or reallocated employees. That new section clarifies that our existing practice at the district that employees that are subject to reassignment or reallocation shall be appraised annually following the date of their reassignment or reallocation. Before I go on again, trustees, do you have any questions or need clarification? Okay. Rule 9.4, administration of systems, regarding the record keeping of personnel evaluations maintained in accordance with the district's information governance program. So we just made sure that we were updating and letting everyone know that our records were going to be following the IG program that we currently have set up at the district. Rule 11.6A, number 2, for suspension, eliminated an option for suspensions with pay. That provision was never used, so that's why that got eliminated. Rule 11.6A, number 4, revise the language to be consistent with the district's workplace violence protection policy and Missouri law. Rule 11.6B, 8, and 18, reasons for which disciplinary action may be taken. Delete the word harassing and provided a revised definition for a behavior or conduct that constitutes harassment, discrimination, or retaliation of any kind, or is otherwise in violation of the district's equal opportunity and workplace harassment policy. Rule 12.3b, interpretation of job descriptions, deletes the term definitive. Rule 13.3, payment of compensation, added training program adjustments to the definition. And it also added review dates may be modified in connection with any reallocation or demotion. Rule 13.4 regarding pay rates added employees in the BT schedule to the various rules, including the entrance pay, overtime rates, and the other rules that we have listed under the pay rates. Rule 13.5B, working overtime, added failure to report all hours worked or performing work without prior approval as grounds for discipline. Rule 13.5E, with the calculation of overtime, deleted the requirement that the department head must authorize all overtime. Questions before I move on, trustees? Okay. Rule 13.5, with the monitoring overtime, added that each department shall manage overtime. Rule 13.5I, standby pay, deleted the section of the rule regarding discipline for failure to appear for standby duty because it was already covered in Rule 11.6B. Rule 13.6B, with floating holidays, deleted a portion of the rule that previously addressed earning floating holidays because that is already covered in the district's policy on sick leave and floating holidays. Rule 13.6C, there was a public comment to have one of the provisions in the collective bargaining agreement added to that particular rule. We chose not to add that because it was already covered in the collective bargaining agreement and in an aside letter for that collective bargaining agreement. Rule 14.A, vacation leave and general provisions, deleted a provision allowing the appointing authority to withhold vacation, but what it added was vacation schedule shall be established by the appointing authorities. Rule 14.1B, with the computation of vacation leave, changed the prior monthly rate accrual to an annual accrual. So it used to only accrue every month, now it's accruing annually. Rule 14.1C, vacation leave accrual during military service, maintained an existing practice of accumulation of vacation leave during the period of active military service, subject to vesting requirements, completion of initial probation period, in the case new employees, and elapsing 1 day upon return from military service from all others. Rule 14.1D, restrictions on granting vacation leave, regularly scheduled vacation leave, eliminated the requirement that regularly scheduled vacation may only be taken in increments of 1/2 or whole days. Rule 14.1D2, the emergency vacation leave rule, increased the amount of emergency vacation that can be taken from 32 hours to 40 hours for employees on shift differentials. Rule 14.1D, number 3, hourly increment vacation, continued the existing practice that allowed hourly increments of vacation and adds that after the initial hours, such leave may be taken in 0.1 hour increments. And it continues just an existing practice that we have. Rule 14.3D, sick leave and absences due to illnesses in an employee's household. That rule was adjusted to further clarify FMLA qualifying events are not subject to the 3-day limitation. Rule 14.5A and B, military service reserve leave with or without pay, continues an existing practice, but references the maximum allowable accumulation of vacation leave in Rule 14.1. The rule expressly subjects any limitations set forth by state and federal law. Bereavement leave, which is Rule 14.7, as the italicized phrase is indicated, that when a death occurs with an employee's immediate family or a relative who resides within that employee's home. They may take paid leave in accordance with that paragraph. Rule 14.10, leave without pay, continues the existing rule that the appointing authority can grant leave after all other FMLA. They can grant 28-day consecutive leave. It makes clear our existing practice that all leave is only available after all, the 28-day leave is only available after all leave has been exhausted, including FMLA leave. Rule 14.12, FMLA leave adds language to conform to our legal requirements that FMLA leave may be made available to individuals to provide assistance to a spouse, a son, a daughter, or a parent who is on call or in active military duty leave status. And the last change is Rule 14.14, which is bonding leave. This is a new provision that the district added, which allows those that are eligible and receiving FMLA to care for a newborn or newly adopted foster child to qualify for bonding leave to the extent allowed by the district's new bonding leave policy. These are all the changes that were presented before the commission. Trustees, do you have any questions?
This is Jim Singer. There's quite a reverberation. Could people turn mute on? So, am I correct? I mean, this seems to be a review and cleanup of the civil service rules. I mean, I haven't seen us do something like this in the last, since I've been a trustee. Is that, am I right in thinking that you sat down and reviewed what had to be updated and clarified?
Trustee Singer, that is correct. Part of the collective bargaining agreement made changes, and also we made clarification or cleanup changes, just as you stated, to the civil service rules. My understanding is that the last time that was done was in 2017.
Okay. I mean, but I assume that many of these rules were not, I mean, well, I should ask, were they bargained? Or are they just, are they management kind of updating the civil service code?
The answer would be both. So some of these were bargained for, like the shift differential changes, the accumulation of vacation leave. Those were items that were bargained for, but some of the cleanup was updates to like FMLA to make sure we're being legally compliant, or military leave to make sure that we were following the latest rules on the benefits to our employees that are serving for our country.
Yeah, Jim, another piece I'll add to that is Tracy and Susan Myers in the General Counsel's office has spent the last couple of years updating our policies to bring them in line with all new rules and everything that exist, doing reviews of those and cleaning them up. So a lot of the changes also that Tracy gave you were either as a result of that included in the negotiations, or some of that cleanup is kind of the last piece of cleaning up all of our rules by making sure the civil service rules are correct. We wanted to make sure we had the policy set up first, and so that's also a big chunk of what caused some of these changes.
Have these changes been shown to the labor unions?
Yes. And the labor unions provided commentary at the public meeting when we presented it to the commissioners.
Okay, well, thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Trustee.
Move on to the next.
Thank you. Proposed ordinance 15643 will authorize staff to enter into a lease agreement with the Holly Hills Improvement Association. They lease a parcel of district-owned property to use as a community garden. The lease will be for an initial 5-year term with 1 5-year renewal option. The rental rate is $1 based upon a prior board approval. We've had a lease with this association since 2007. That lease expired, and so we felt the opportunity to go ahead and initiate a new lease. So that is what proposed ordinance 15643 will cover on next Thursday's board agenda. There any questions? There's a picture in your packet. It's up on the board right now. That's kind of that's a picture of the area. It's on a corner lot, and they use that as a community garden. Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is just your final reminder about how the elections will work at the board meetings next week. So at the end of the meeting, we are going to elect a board chair and a new vice chair. And so the way that'll work is I am going to first open the floor to the 3 county trustees to look for a nomination for a city trustee for the chair position. So the 3 county trustees will be able to nominate a city trustee for the chair position. If there's more than one person nominated, then we'll have to work that out through a vote. But if there's one nomination, then we'll call for a vote of each of the trustees to approve the chair. And then just on the county. I'm sorry, just on the county. And then we'll go through the same process for vice chair, only we will open it to the city trustees who will be able to nominate a county trustee for vice chair and go through the same process. So it's going to be pretty much just the way I laid it out. I'll have a short script where I will specifically call for county or city trustees to nominate somebody from the other group. And then the group that is nominating will vote. And then starting next month, we'll have new officers of the board, and the chair will be in charge of committee assignments. And we.
Tim?
Yes, Jim.
I have a couple of questions. I guess first, what? Boy, there's the feedback. Is
Jim? Do you have both of your like a phone and the computer?
No, my phone is. You know what? I'll get off this. I don't think it's my. Well, maybe it is.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. What is the term of these offices? For how long will the people be holding?
There are 2-year terms,
Starting
right?
March 16th.
Okay. Starting March 16th.
Okay, and are we required? Do the current officers? Well, here's my issue that I wanted to raise. I am. I guess after my first year of appointment, which goes back over 5 years ago, I'm like an at-will trustee. I don't really have a term, and I know that, I don't know, Mike can speak for himself, but I thought Mike had said he's leaving soon. So we've got, I could be replaced at any time. Mike my understanding is he's leaving, so it's like 2 of us who might not be here for very long are selecting people that will be in place for the next 2 years. I just started wondering if it didn't make sense to me.
Well, we've got a limited group. We only have 3 trustees from each one. And so I think that both you and Michael have worked with this group of trustees for at least a little bit. So I think you're in a good position to be able to make a recommendation. And it's a small group to vote on. So we're following the rules. The rules don't specify that somebody who's on an unappointed term or who is going to be retiring from the board soon cannot vote. And I think, like I said, you guys right now have the most experience on the board too. And so I think there's a general comfort level that you're capable of making a good determination. If in fact you want to nominate and vote, you can always abstain, I suppose.
Jim, the only other guidance
What
from
would be the?
I'm sorry.
What would happen if we just delayed? I mean, do the current officers stay in place, or by charter does their term end?
I don't think it's charter. I think it's board rules, and Michael has already
And they expire.
the terms
office
expire. So the office terms do expire, and Michael has already indicated that this will be his last meeting. He is retiring, so the board chair is retiring after the March meeting.
Jim,
It is
really
that's my, and I don't know how much longer I'm going to be on. So it just seems odd that Mike and I but anyway, okay.
So Jim, I'll just leave this. What we're doing right now has been the common practice and the way this process has been done, at least in the 25 years I've been here. It is up to the board if they want to delay this and operate without a chair and a vice chair. That is an option. It is not the way it's been done in the past, primarily because of the hard expiration date of the position of vice chair and chair. I think that's probably the reason it's been done this way in the past.
So just to understand, the chair's term will end if the board, whether the board acts or not.
The chair and vice chair's terms will end March 15th.
Got it.
Any other questions about that or the process?
Well, you answered my questions. Thanks.
Okay. All right, Trustee Wilson, I think we're ready to move on to the next item.
The next item.
Yep, so we'll need to vote, and we'll need to take a roll call vote. So the motion is to go into closed session to discuss legal, confidential, or privileged matters under 61021 sub 1. So I'm going to take a roll call vote. Trustee Wabi?
Aye.
Trustee Fair?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson? Trustee Singer?
Yes.
Trustee Evans?
Yes.
Trustee Yates?
Yes.
All right, we're in closed session.
Trustee Wilson, let us get everything set up. People will have Larson, we can continue with closing the meeting.
Okay, the open meeting is back in session. There's no further business. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. With no further business, folks, it's been the pleasure of my life. The meeting is adjourned.
Sounds like you want these to be more than once a month.
Trustee Yates, do you have a few minutes after we get this cleaned up? Thank you. I won't do this to you anymore at another committee meeting, I promise. So I do have some.